So the last few weeks at Restoration Church, we've been in this series looking at the gospel according to John. And what I've said is John's account of the gospel is a little different than the other three writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John's account really points to the person of Jesus more than John does to the actions. So it points to the person of Jesus as somebody that we should trust, somebody who has power, somebody who is strong. And I want to talk about that aspect that John points to of Jesus' power while we're worshiping together, whether that's this morning or the afternoon or whenever you worship. I want to talk about the power that he's pointing to. See, John's a little less worried about the details and much more worried about pointing to the person of Jesus. So I want to talk about Jesus' power. I want to talk about strength. I want to talk about heroes. I love a good superhero movie. I'm a huge fan of superhero movies, and I like a lot of the old school stuff. Like, I love when Clark Kent becomes Superman or Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man. Like, I love that. And growing up, I had two superheroes that I was especially fond of. It was He-Man and She-Ra. Now, there's a picture, I believe, coming up of He-Man and She-Ra for those of you that are too young to know who they are, and for those of you that are a little too old to know who they are. It was late 80s. I watched He-Man and She-Ra, and She-Ra was known as the Princess of Power. And my favorite episodes were when they would come together, when they would have an episode of the show and they would come together. And I actually had some friends who had the castle and who had the different characters, and the best friends that I had were the people that had that, because I could go over and I could play with them and I could think about the power that they had. As I said last week, I've spent some time on social media, and something hit me this week when I was on social media, and I want to just offer an aside right now. I want to offer an aside about real superheroes. I want you to see this image that I saw this week. This is an image of medical providers. Look, I thought He-Man and She-Ra were really important. They have nothing on these folks. These nurses and doctors who are out on the front lines right now, EMTs who are putting their life at risk so that they can help other people. As I've had my kids at home just for a couple of weeks now, teachers, you are superheroes. Really, really, you make such a difference. And I could just go on down the line. Those folks who are in the grocery stores right now and who are stocking the shelves and working at the register so that we can eat, and those people who are still picking up trash, and people who are giving of themselves over and over again are real superheroes right now. And I realized one of the reasons I love that image, one of the reasons I love He-Man and She-Ra, one of the reasons I love Superman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, is because I love power. I love the power that they have and the power that they gain, and I'm drawn to that story of superheroes because I'm drawn to power. People want power. Now, I want to talk about it in a little bit different way than maybe you think. I'm not talking about like big business power. I'm not talking about maybe ego or pride power. I'm talking about power that makes us feel powerful and strong. And I want to look at it through the lens of John chapter 18 this morning, and the lens of the desire to have power. Now, this is a bit of a long passage. It's 14 verses, so stick with me for just a minute as I read. It says, "Now Judas, who betrayed him," and the him is Jesus, "knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches and lanterns and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, 'Who is it you want?' 'Jesus of Nazareth,' they replied. 'I am he,' Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, 'I am he,' they drew back and they fell to the ground. Again he asked them, 'Who is it you want?' 'Jesus of Nazareth,' they said. Jesus answered, 'I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go.' This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. 'I have not lost one of those you gave me.' Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. The servant was named Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, 'Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?' Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people. In a movie, this might feel like the climax of the movie. The big point, the point where Jesus has been praying in the garden with his disciples. He knows what's about to happen, and then Judas shows up. Judas, who's often referred to as the betrayer. I actually think in some ways Judas was a superhero. It's easy, I think, for us to look at him and say, Judas was just a terrible person, what a terrible disciple. But I think Judas wanted what we're talking about this morning. I think Judas wanted power. I think he followed Jesus because he believed in power. He believed that Christ had a lot of power. He followed him. He gave his life to him. And that night he walked in boldly with that group of soldiers, maybe, just maybe, in hope that it would push Jesus to show Jesus' power. That it would push him to show his power in a different way. I think maybe, just maybe, Judas wanted Christ to be the king that he longed for him to be. To step up and be the leader that he longed for him to be. I think that he was scared. Maybe actually Judas isn't a superhero. Maybe he's a supervillain. All good superhero movies have a supervillain, and most supervillains are just superheroes who were misguided, who made wrong decisions, who went down a wrong path. I can only imagine what it was like to be in the garden that night. The disciples had just had that last meal with Jesus together. Jesus was washing their feet, and here they are in the garden. All of a sudden, they move from this time of prayer to suddenly being surrounded by soldiers that were carrying torches and swords. It would have been a scary moment. And then in walks Judas, one of them. Judas, one of the 12, one that was so deeply close, and he offers Jesus a kiss. And I remember a seminary professor saying to us, and it almost seemed like heresy at the time, perhaps we need to give Judas a break. I hadn't wanted to give him a break. I still often don't want to give him a break. But she said, what if Judas was just waiting for Jesus to step up and show them the leader that he was? What if Judas just wanted Jesus to show his power to everyone? What if he wanted Jesus to stop being so meek and mild and let them know that he had power? Now, what's interesting about this passage to me, and every time I read it, I find myself in the same place. Jesus seems so darn calm. He seems to be in complete control of what's going on. He doesn't seem to have lost any of his power. He steps up here and he uses the power that Christ has. Now, in the other accounts of the gospel story, we get a little bit different Jesus in this moment. We get a little bit different things. Jesus says things like, if it be your will, remove this cup from me. But that's not the Jesus that John is pointing us to. John points us to Jesus, who's really powerful. He says, shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? I feel like that's John's way of Jesus looking at them and saying, bring it. I'm ready. Let's do this. In the midst of all these soldiers coming to get Jesus, he remains very calm in the use of his power. Look at what the passage says. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, he went out and asked them, who is it you want? And they answered him very clearly. They said, we want Jesus of Nazareth. And what did he say? He said, I am he, Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them when Jesus said, I am he. They drew back and they fell to the ground. Now this is a really powerful moment, right? That's why I said it feels like the climax of the story, even though it's not. See, it's really powerful moment here. I imagine this was a moment of clarification for everybody. Judas would have been really concerned about his actions here because of the words that Jesus said. Remember, if you've been listening to the sermons, if you've been part of our worship or reading what we've been reading the last few weeks, this phrase, I am, is an important passage. And that's what Jesus uses here. He says, I am he. Here it is again, I am he. And scholars believe that this is Jesus making a really significant statement. Because of what God says to Moses back in the burning bush, when God says, when they ask who I am, say, I am. And it's a significant moment where Jesus is saying again, I and the God of Israel am one. I am. I and the God of the universe are one. Now this is powerful. These must be powerful words because look at what happens to the soldiers. It says they drew back and they fell to the ground. I bet it was like this force that came out of Jesus when he said these words. I am he. And the soldiers, they fall down to the ground. The entire group falls. Even though they've come to arrest Jesus and they've brought swords and they've brought torches, the truth is they're incredibly powerless in his presence. They're involuntarily thrown to the ground. This tells us Jesus gave himself up by his own choice. This was his decision to use his power in this way. Now then there's Peter. For Peter, this isn't enough. For Peter, it's not okay that Jesus is going to be taken by them. Because what does Peter do? Peter tries to be a superhero here. He has great intentions, but he comes out in the moment and he takes off the ear of one person, the servant to the high priest. He takes off the ear. And it's a really interesting moment in this story because I think I would have been a lot like Peter, just trying to gain some control, to go and just do something to stop what was happening. I think Peter is desperately afraid. Maybe just in this moment he's forgotten that Jesus is the God of peace. He feels out of control. I don't know about you, but I feel a little out of control right now. I don't know about you, but I feel like I just need to do something to fix this. Things are changing every day. Things are shutting down, or are they opening up? Numbers are coming in of cases of COVID-19 that are getting higher and higher. We can't physically be connected to people that often bring us peace. Heck, we can't even worship together in common physical presence. In natural moments, it's natural for me in moments like these that I want to pull a Peter. That I want to step up, take the reins by the horn, and do something. I've talked to so many people who are feeling that way right now, as if their world is spinning out of control. Teachers and students, single folks, healthcare professionals, myself, we all want to do something. We want to step into our superhero role. We want something. Even that dog who's barking next door, he wants something. He wants to do something, but I want to say something to us today. I want to say something to me that I want you to get to hear. We don't all have to be superheroes. I'm really grateful for those that are the real life superheroes that are on the front line right now, but you and I may not be able to be that superhero right now. I think what we need is the power and the calmness and the peace of Christ. I think that's the way that we need to receive Christ's power right now. I want you to think about three things that Christ's power might bring us in the midst of this moment. The first one is the power to persevere. Friends, we are in a season of persevering. Amen? You could say amen wherever you are. You could say it to your family. Amen. We are in a season of persevering. Things are being canceled every day. As I said last week, I got to do a wedding for two couples that wasn't planned. They didn't get to have the wedding that they had planned. That wasn't what they expected. My kids are disappointed. Their teachers are disappointed. Their teachers from our kids' school sent a video this week from every teacher in the school just saying, we miss you and we're thinking about you. Christ gives us the power to persevere in times that are unknown, friends, and in times that we feel powerless. So how do we persevere right now? How do we help other people persevere? One way might be picking up the phone and calling a friend, because that helps us and that helps them. Sending a text or sending an email. Writing a letter. Maybe the power to persevere right now is not putting something snarky or nasty on social media. Maybe it's to try to fill these mediums with things of encouragement and words of positivity. Maybe it's that you invite a friend to experience Restoration's online worship, or to one of our 3 offerings that we offer throughout the week. Maybe it's you say, hey, I want to be generous to Restoration right now because that's the way that I can bring perseverance to what we're doing. So with all of that, I'm curious, how are you persevering right now? I want to invite you to think about that. Christ brings us the power to persevere. Here's the second thing. In this moment, we are given the power to forgive and to be forgiven. We all mess up. We all make mistakes. Friends, during this time when I have my kids at home all day and I'm at home all day, and my wife has been at home, I am making a lot of mistakes. They are not always seeing me at my best because I get frustrated and I get tired and I get overwhelmed with more Zoom meetings. And I have had to more than once over the last few weeks ask my family for forgiveness. We are given the power to forgive and to forgive others. When you're quarantined with others, I think this gets harder. But friends, look at our story today. Peter and Judas both mess up. One betrayed, one overfunctioned. Friends, if Christ can forgive them, we can forgive one another for the things that are driving us crazy right now. I think this is a necessary season, maybe more than ever, to forgive one another and to lean into Christ's power of forgiveness. And here's the final thing. We're given the power to love. I love this moment. When Jesus is being violently arrested, what does he choose to do? He chooses to show love. He reaches up, the gospel accounts tell us he reaches up and he heals the man whose ear got cut off. A man who came to arrest him. A man who came in with those who had torches and those who had swords. Jesus doesn't wait for the perfect moment to love. He loves in the midst of the chaos. He loves in the midst of the unknown. The man probably had better hearing when Jesus was done than he did before. Christ gives him a gift. That gift of love in the midst of it. That's the kind of love that Jesus gives us. I want to say, I've been so blessed to watch so many of you interacting on social media, gotten so many emails and calls about ways that we can support our community. People checking in on Forest Edge and wondering how they're doing and wondering how we can help out Cornerstones in the shelter. Friends, you are showing such rich love right now. Every time I pick up the phone and call somebody, or every time I get a Facebook message or an email, I am encouraged. And I am receiving such love. Friends, it's hard. We're in a hard season. This is a time to get power from Christ. To receive that power. To lean on the power to persevere, the power to forgive, and the power to love. It's a hard time. I don't know about you, but I want to be more like Christ in this time and less like Judas. Because seriously, y'all, who wants to be like Judas?